hello, come in. Oh, come in. You've managed to look in on Christmas Eve as well. Do have a seat. You're just in time, actually, because I'm going to set off and we'll go to midnight mass. It's always lovely to be in church at midnight and, you know, the magical moment, and come home and it's already Christmas. We may, in a time-honoured manner, go to the church via the pub, actually. My son's down there, we'll pick him up and we'll go together. But you've caught me in, so that's good. But, of course, last time I read you that rather nice Father Christmas coming to Narnia thing, which is lovely. And Christmas ought to be full of that kind of thing. Father Christmas and us up and all of those. But I'm sure your heart, as well as mine, and lots of other people's, have really been torn open by the news. I mean, the appalling violence that started off, obviously, in and against Israel on the 7th, but which has spilled over, and now there's this catastrophe, this catastrophic war is happening, and it's happening in this holy season and in the Middle East. And some people are saying, oh goodness, isn't it awful, as though it was a shock that this kind of violence occurs in the midst of or near a holy place. I mean, sadly, the holy places have been very torn. But one of the things that strikes me is that part of the message of Christmas itself is that Jesus doesn't stay safe and comfy and cozy up in heaven. He comes down and gets involved, and he takes the risk. And the world into which he was born was torn and fractured, and there were soldiers on the streets then. And in fact, we know that not long after he was born, you know, his family were forced to flee, you know, because of the violence of Herod. And God knew perfectly well when he chose to become fully human, the world he's coming into. And I think he did it to be in solidarity with those who suffer. It doesn't matter which side or label. God became human. The gospel is for Jew and Gentile alike. And I'm sure God's heart is also, like so many people's, torn open by the suffering. Anyway, I wanted to read you a Christmas Eve / Christmas Day poem, and I'm going to read you a new one. I have to say, I actually composed this poem before the recent tragic, in particular, cycle of tragic events began in Israel and Gaza. But I suppose the long struggles and troubles of that place were in my mind. I thought about Mary and Joseph trying to find somewhere that they can at least have a roof over their heads for the baby to be born. And that is the plight of so many mothers-to-be. And I decided not to name Mary, but just to think of her as a woman on the move. And I wrote it before this present catastrophic war. But in fact, it was then made public. I wrote it to be turned into an anthem by the composer Joe Marsh. And it was the first Sunday in Advent, just 4 Sundays, just 4 weeks ago, that it was performed at St John the Evangelist, St John's College in Cambridge. And I realised, as everybody looked at the poem in the programme and talked to me about it afterwards, that they assumed it was composed specifically about this crisis, but it wasn't. And yet when I read it now, I do feel it helps me at least to bring some prayers for this tragedy into the context of my faith. So I titled the poem, It's Getting Darker. She decided to call it The Hidden Light, and perhaps that's the more optimistic title. That's also a phrase in the poem. So I'm thinking of not just of Mary and Joseph, but of so many others. It's getting darker, darker all the time, and she is weary and beset with fear. Yet in the darkness of her womb he stirs, her tiny hope, the one who is to come. So on she plods, on past the hostile stairs, the checkpoints and the soldiers on the street, seeking some shelter, somewhere to retreat and bring to birth the hidden light she bears. She finds her shelter now, and we attend her, attend this burdened girl who speaks for us, whispers to God a broken world's soft yes. Come to be born with us. Come, find us here, outface for us the darkness we can't face. Show us the face of love that casts out fear. And of course, I'm remembering what Jesus himself would say when he grew up and survived that terribly shaky start. He said that love casts out fear, and if we're to find a way of casting out the fears on every side and the fears that breed the hatreds and insecurities, then I think love is the missing word. Now, I want to finish just by reciting you another poem, which again is specifically about Christmas. And this poem is called Descent. And it's a poem which is astonished by what happens at Bethlehem in the midst of the great classical civilizations of pagan antiquity, and if you like, the Olympian gods and the perfect Grecian marble friezes and everybody up there being immortal and disdaining us. God says, no, I'm going to do something completely different. So this poem is called Descent. They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown, for lofty pride aspires to rise. But you came down. You dropped down from the mountains sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. Where chiselled marble seemed to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice, and victims on their altars bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain. But you were born to these burdens, borne by all, born with us all, astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save. So if you catch this on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and if you come along to Midnight Mass, if you're going to still be around, then if I don't see you before, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.